From Flourish DX School, this is the Flourishing at School podcast. With mental health becoming a global priority, we are your partner for creating schools where students, teachers and school leaders feel good and function well, becoming the best versions of themselves and contributing to a flourishing world.
Welcome to the Flourishing at School podcast. I'm Tamara Lechner. Each week, my co-host Jason Van Schie and I bring you the best practitioners, academics, and everything in between in order to inform whole school mental health. I'm delighted that we have John Gale joining us from London today. And Jason, you are still in London. We recorded yesterday. You were in London. It was cold. Any updates on how you're doing acclimatizing to this different weather?
It is still freezing. Even the Londoners are saying how cold it is. So I'm assuming it must be really, really cold. No, I'm not acclimatizing. I don't plan on doing that either because I'm heading back to Perth tomorrow evening. So no, I'm ready to go home and defrost.
It's all right for some. Some of us have to stay and endure.
Yeah, we're just talking about before we started recording, I don't actually know. Yeah, I was calling it -2, but it's actually -2. But we're just not used to negatives in front of numbers when it comes to temperature in Perth. So I know, Tamara, it gets pretty cold out where you are too. So
it does. I like to avoid the negatives. And we actually don't have them very frequently here. Mm. And I think one of the things that I notice when I'm less resilient, the temperature bothers me more. I can manage with a negative temperature when I'm having a good day, but it's one of those things that I have to watch for my well-being. If I'm going down, I notice that the weather impacts me more.
But I did visit you in winter one time, and I remember it was beautiful outlook there from the island, looking out over the Olympus Mountains with the snow-capped peaks. It's really idyllic, amazing part of the world.
It is a beautiful, beautiful place. And I have a practice that I do that's called always go the pretty way. John was saying before we hopped on that he has a long commute. In Victoria, nobody commutes for more than 15 or 20 minutes maximum. In fact, when we first moved here, we lived 7 minutes from our children's school. And we would have friends say, "Oh, that's too far for us to come and bring our kids to play. Could you come to our house instead?" So it's all about that mindset, right? So let's get to this. John is a friend of Jason's, and I'm meeting him for the first time. He's a maths teacher by trade, and he's worked in independent and boarding schools, including Downhouse and Wellington College, which I have heard about both of these schools. He's worked predominantly in the pastoral care and well-being side of school. He's been a housemaster, a head of boarding, a deputy head of pastoral care, and he was recruited by Eton College to be part of the team setting up their new state boarding school. And he's had the responsibility for the boarding and pastoral side once again. And currently, he is the principal of King's in Oxford. So I can't wait to hear more about your career, John. Welcome to the Flourishing at School podcast.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. Nice to be invited on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, John, we go way back. In fact, you were one of the very first contacts I actually had in schools, and the first UK contact I had in the school. We must have met in 2015, 2016.
It was around then, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago, and it's been great that we've been able to keep in touch despite you moving around a little bit in that time.
Yeah.
But Tamara's given us a bit of the highlights, if you like. It'd be great to hear from the horse's mouth, about your experience to date, particularly on the wellbeing side.
Oh, certainly, on the wellbeing side, it's I think that's been where I've seen the biggest changes in education. As a maths teacher, pedagogy, studying in front of the students, the way you approach that hasn't changed a huge amount, I've got to say, in 20 years. What has changed a lot, though, is the way we approach sort of the well-being of students, the mental health of students. That's really come on in huge leaps and bounds. In no little thanks to sort of programs like Flourishing. So that would be my sort of main sort of experience. I'm happy to stand up in front of a class and go on about Pythagoras and things like this till the cows come home. It's fairly similar now to what I was doing 20 years ago. But actually, when I first started teaching, I was in a little country grammar school in a place called Lincolnshire in England. It's a bit of a countryside backwater type sort of place, without being sort of rude. It's very quiet, calm, pastoral sort of life. And there was no mention of mental health at all in the school at the time. Going back to the sort of late 90s, there really was nothing. Child protection was sort of just coming in. And then you sort of fast forward through to talking about holistic education over the next few years. Holistic education started coming in, especially when I started teaching in sort of independent boarding schools from that point on. And people talk holistic. Everything had to be holistic. So not only are you teaching them the academic side of life, but you're doing some PSHE, and within PSHE, you're looking at sort of healthcare. You're looking at their emotions a bit. It's just gradually sort of filtered in. It was when I got to Wellington. Wellington was the sort of the real turning point. Wellington College in Berkshire. I was there a year when it was a fairly standard boarding school, and then Anthony Selden turned up. Sir Doctor, as he is now, Anthony Selden turned up. I think at some point in the first year he was with us, he toddled off to Australia. He went to Geelong Grammar, and he saw the work they were doing on sort of happiness and sort of positive mental health. He came back to Wellington, stole their ideas shamelessly, promoted them within Wellington, started something called happiness lessons, where he never asked me to teach a happiness lesson. I don't know why. I'm one of the happiest people out, but he never asked me to do it. Probably too busy in the maths classroom. So he brought in happiness lessons, which the media in the UK went absolutely crazy for. We had TV camera crews around. We had so many columns in all the papers talking about happiness. And I think that was, if not the catalyst, it was certainly, we're talking about early adoption of that sort of approach to looking after sort of students, particularly in the boarding sector, when you've got them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're not sending them home at 4 o'clock. So that was my sort of first introduction to how serious schools needed to take mental health of their students. So that was when I sort of left Wellington and became a housemaster, and sort of carried those ideas with me that mental health is important. And I worked with my boarding students to make sure that they were in a good place mentally as best I could, with the knowledge that I had then. Moving on from that school was when I set up Holycourt College, Eton's state boarding school. We really made sure, at this point, it was a huge consideration. Was the wellbeing, the mental health of our students was absolutely massive at that point, and built into what we were doing. Eton, I noticed, were on board as well. They were developing this with us. So that was a very exciting time to sort of be around. Then I moved from there into being deputy head at a school that was catering for international students within the UK. So this is where my link with Jason started, my link with Flourishing started. The school I was at, I was deputy head. I was in charge of the pastoral care of all these students coming from all around the world. Some on a 1-year course, some on a 2-year course, but none for any huge length of time. We didn't have them from 11 to 18. We literally had them for 1-2 years tops. And they would arrive to us from a school in a faraway country, didn't speak English, had a totally different system, different way of doing things. So what I found was that I was having to deal with a huge amount of mental health issues. These students were coming to us with all sorts of issues, and not coping very well being away from their parents for the first time, not coping well with being a boarder, not coping well with being in the UK and the cold weather, things like this. It's a huge shock to the system, the cultural shock, really affected their mental health, which for some of them wasn't good anyway. And I was being very reactive. It was only after someone had serious issues that I would find out and I would try and deal with it. So, that's what got me to thinking, is there a way of managing this so that if we didn't get to the point where someone was having a breakdown or really, really self-harming or getting to that level of sort of mental health problems? And I then went on a long hunt on the internet to try to find what I could. And obviously my link with Anthony Selden led me through the Positive Schools website, the conglomeration of schools that are working on sort of positive mental health. And I just saw a little advert on that website for Flourishing. And I clicked on it. And I think within 24 hours, Jason had got back to me saying, "Oh, you've clicked on our advert," and so the rest is history. And it took a while to get sort of Flourishing up and running. I think I moved to another school at that point, but we got there, didn't we? We managed to get Flourishing sort of ingrained in what a school called Heathfield in the UK. It's a boarding school in Ascot. And we got Flourishing up and running there, and Jason came over and introduced it to the staff, to the students, to the parents, and they bought into it.
Jeepers! I've forgotten about that. Well, first of all, John, I'd forgotten that you'd worked at that international school, and that's where we first actually connected. But then I remember, when I flew over here and you got me to present at Heathfield, you didn't think about jet lag at all. I remember
you got to sing for yourself, Jason. You got to sing for yourself.
The day I got in, it was like an 8 p.m. presentation, which was 4 a.m. on my body clock that day.
Yeah.
So,
freezing cold.
Freezing cold. And then we, the next day, we got in the car and drove up to York 4 hours up the motorway.
4 hours up the M1 to the York. To the organisation. That's what
I'd put that in the dark recesses of my mind for that trip. That was 48 hours, actually. My first trip to the UK, 48 hours. It was big.
It's monumental.
Yes. And thank you again for driving us all the way up to Bootham School, it was.
Bootham School, that's right.
Yeah. But John, tell us, because obviously, you were engaging with us to measure pupil wellbeing. So what got you interested in the measurement side of Flourishing? Being
able to sort of, I don't want to say quantify, because I think that gives all the wrong sort of ideas, but having an idea of the level of need. I think that's probably a better way of saying it, the level of need of the students. The interesting part about that was, as I said, I was working at the international school and we had nothing. We had students coming in, we knew nothing of their background, we knew nothing at all about them. Their families, their agents were very, very reluctant to disclose anything. If there were problems, they wouldn't disclose them for fear that we wouldn't accept them, which is crazy because we would. So, it was a case of how can I tell whether Jeffrey is more deserving of the limited time I had than Jemima was. And just how bad is Jeffrey? Just how bad is Jemima? Am I looking at sort of high level interventions? Am I looking at getting sort of external agencies involved? Am I looking at sort of just a housemaster, just spending a bit of time and a bit of TLC? The response that we needed would depend on the level of need of the child, and having a way of being able to not just quantify the level of need, but actually to target exactly which areas of need that student had, enabled us to put into place the measures that we could to best help that student.
I think we went on a bit of a journey with that though as well, John, because from memory, you were more interested in, that was an interest of yours, trying to identify, I guess, pathology or illness symptoms or distress.
Yeah.
Where I was saying, no, what we're really interested in is more primary prevention. How do we identify across all pupils the pillars of flourishing? So looking at the PEMA model and then going, well, this is something that every girl at the school could actually benefit from, rather than just trying to identify those pupils who maybe already, in most cases, the schools generally know who are the ones that they need to keep more of an eye on. or have a treatment plan for, but it was more like, how can we get every girl the targeted attention they need to flourish?
Yes, I remember we did have a few discussions about what flourishing was aimed at, what it could do, what it should be used for, what I wanted to use it for. You'll be happy to know that I've obviously come around to your way of thinking and realised, yes, you were right all along, and I was being a mathematician and wanted some lovely numbers, and but no, there are alternatives to flourishing in the market in the UK, but my problem with them, and what I think flourishing does so much better, is the ones that are out there generally are a bit more quantifying. They really do sort of point the finger, this person, this is fine, that's the one you need to focus on. The trouble is, when you get to that stage, as you said, 99% of the time you already know, as a teacher, as a housemaster, as a pastoral care lead, you already know, because they are displaying some massive signs. There's a lot of red flags flying around. But I think what I liked about sort of flourishing when we ran it through the first couple of times was it was highlighting certain areas for certain students who you would have said 100% that student is absolutely fine. They are flourishing, but it's coming back in certain areas so they weren't. And we didn't have to put in these big elaborate sort of care packages for them. We could just sit quietly with a much lower level sort of intervention and have a cup of tea with them, a few biscuits, and just have a bit of a chat. And you can sense already that they're relieved that they were talking about it. So it's nice to see that. Plus, with flourishing was one thing that flourishing was really fantastic. Was if we put in a cohort-wide intervention, we could see the results across the cohort. So it wasn't just about the individual. You could just see the results because the analysis sort of structure of flourishing. You could see all the boys in year 10. Suddenly, you've been working on a particular thing in PSHE or in tutor time or whatever in the boarding house, and you can see you run flourishing, give it 5-6 weeks of this sort of intervention, run it again, and you can see the difference it's making across that group. So it's good. It's good.
So John and Jason, just to clarify for our audience, because people are listening and they're hearing the word flourishing multiple times, and
Yes.
I think we're talking about it around two separate concepts. So we have the measurement, which we now call Flourish DX Schools. And I think when you first used it, John, it was more referred to as flourishing at school. And hence,
Yes.
you've been saying flourishing when you're talking about measurement.
Apologies,
which
yes.
is, no. I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that if someone's listening going, well, what am I doing? Am I measuring? Am I teaching? And that I think when you've been saying flourishing, you're referring to the measurement tool. And then you've talked separately about pastoral care and tutor lessons around the skills to flourishing. And so there's this balance of measuring and teaching. Am I right in that?
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah. Flourish DX is the tool, as you say, which enables us to try to get our students and staff to the point where they are flourishing. That state of flourishing that we aspire to, and where you've taken the name of the tool from. Absolutely right. Because we have used this for staff as well as students. We made it voluntary for staff to use, and it was taken up by some, not by others. But those that took it up, you would see them sitting together in the staff room discussing, which was nice to see. I'm sure some thought they were mad, but they got a lot out of it and enjoyed the process, and were just a lot more self-reflective because of it. So, that was quite fun.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, so far we've talked mostly about students, but you did have staff on board as well. So what I want to ask you is, if someone's listening to this and they're just at the beginning of the journey that you started quite a while back, could you share something that you tried in one of your schools that really worked well, that you would recommend that another school might want to try?
The one thing that sort of sticks out to me is you have got to get people on board with it. They've got to want to do it. I have tried to install it in the early days, not against people's wishes, but certainly here's something we're going to do. Let's do it, sort of thing. And they went, oh, okay. It it didn't impact as powerfully as I wanted it to. Trying it again, I really made sure that students and the staff were very much understanding of what it does, what it doesn't do, what they can expect to get out of it, and getting them on board. I took much longer to implement it rather than sort of jumping straight in, and that paid dividends hugely. That really, really made a big difference. The uptake, the seriousness with which people took it, it really did what Jason told me many years ago it should do, which is really get people talking about mental health, using the language of mental health. So I would say definitely if someone's going to start now, get people on board with it first. Sell them the idea. Get some conversations going. Invite somebody in that already uses it to explain the benefits and sort of how it can be done. Because schools and teachers, certainly in the UK, are pretty sceptical places. You've got to sort of really convince some people to sort of get on board with any new initiative. But once you've done it, the majority are there, then the rest come on board fairly quickly because they can see that far from being an intrusive sort of clinical process, it's actually fun. And we got to the point in sort of one school where people were happily sharing their sort of scores in certain areas and asking each other for advice and help, peer to peer, not just tutor to tutee or housemaster to sort of their students in the house. It's if you can get people on board before you start, that's the key. That's the key. Don't just launch it and hope people will come on board. That's the hard way to do it.
I love that advice. It's about the culture of a school, and
Yes. Yeah.
and I often say when I work with schools that if you don't give your culture time to learn, the culture is going to decide for you that this is just another flavor of the month, and they're not going to buy in the deep way that you need to actually make something like this work. So such good advice, and I think I love hearing that the teachers start to have these conversations with one another. It's what we hope when we go in and work with schools. And I know when Jason designed this tool for schools to have these conversations, I love hearing that story. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and it's a testament to your work, John, at least second time around, when you brought everyone around on the journey, that Heathfield is still using Flourishing. So, they're a long-time partner of ours and still giving us great feedback about how to improve the product to make sure it meets the need. So,
I'm glad to hear that.
Hey, John, but not everything goes smoothly, right, in schools, particularly when we're being innovative and trying new things.
True.
So, have you tried any wellbeing interventions or different things in a wellbeing sense in a school that didn't work so well that you'd caution our listeners away from?
I would almost just repeat what I just sort of said. If you do something for the sake of it, if you do something because you've got to do something, if you just generally force something through against the will of the students, against the will of the teachers, if you're doing things just to tick a box, it is soul destroying because it flops and you're standing there watching it flop, and you're standing there watching large numbers of people gleefully smiling at your failure. So I think, don't try to force it. Don't try to force it. If your school or institution hasn't got that sort of self-reflective sort of culture already built in, then I would very much say get that sorted first. Get yourself in a position where staff and colleagues or students can sort of look at what they're doing and say, yeah, okay, I didn't do very well there. I need to improve. Here's how I can improve. Get that culture first. Then something like Flourishing DX will fly. It will absolutely fly. But I have tried to force things. I think I had when I was at the school in London, I had a mental health week, and I invited in all sorts of people and did all sort of workshops, a variety of workshops every day. It took me a long time to do. It cost a lot of money. And literally, for some of the workshops, the people were coming in to study until no one was turning up. Because I didn't get that buy-in first. So that was horrible. I'll tell you the one thing that always works well, though, if you're interested, is if you get a wellbeing dog or two to come in, that's popular no matter what. You can just drop that bombshell the first thing on a Monday morning and it'll still be popular.
John, Justin and I from Geelong Grammar often said there would be no positive education work if we could just give everybody a dog, because dogs immediately boost that happiness on a campus.
Oh, absolutely. I've got, at the moment, here at King's in Oxford, we have a student who has a care dog, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like a support dog.
A support dog with her. And we agreed to have her having a support dog. There was a vital question we should have asked, and that was, what breed is it? So she turned up at the beginning of term in September with a Great Dane. This thing is
a tiny horse.
It is. It's a horse. Oh my God! And so we've got some quite small rooms where we're a school that specialises in small class sizes. So our classes can be anything from 3 or 4 up to about 10 or 12. That's it. And the rooms are sized accordingly. And you suddenly bring a Great Dane into a room designed for sort of 7 or 8 people. Yeah, it takes up a human space. I'm going to say that at least. And the other problem with that is, and it's a lovely dog, very well behaved, very happy to have her here. But the other students, it's teaching them that this isn't a pet. This is not your well-being dog. This is a support dog for that particular student. So there are all sorts of rules. Don't make eye contact. Don't pet it. Don't try and feed it. You just stay away. Just ignore the dog. It's there for a reason. It's working. So that was quite a challenge as well, because I say everybody loves dogs. Everybody wants to go and pet the dog and give it a cuddle. No, we had to keep pulling them away. No, don't get the dog. So that was an interesting one. But yeah, dogs.
Good learning.
Always good to have a dog in school. My daughter at the moment is just doing a mocks ready for GCSEs this year. She's looking at universities. She's very keen to go to Oxford University, and she has chosen the Oxford college she wants to go to because as she was looking at the various sort of websites, one of them had a cat in the library. They have a library cat, and she said, "That's where I'm going." Not just because she loves cats, but because I think it says something about the institution that values and acknowledges the sort of what a pet or an animal has to offer to a student body. That calming sort of influence. That sort of unconditional love when it comes up and sort of nuzzles up to you. It's very healing, very healing. So yeah, there you go. There's a little story for you. My crazy daughter. Yeah.
I like the fact that she saw the animal, but I like the fact that your interpretation of it is that deeper interpretation that this is the ethos of a school. And so thinking about, from your perspective, how a school feels, I'm always curious to know, and I think you'll have a unique pastoral perspective on this. If everything went well and you got it right, people were feeling good and functioning well across the campus, how would you know?
Good question. I think I have worked in a couple of schools that have got it right. I've worked in some that haven't. I've worked in some that have, and I would say there's definitely a buzz. There's just a buzz of sort of energy, positivity. There's you see people walking around. You see the interaction between the students is positive. It's kind. It's respectful. The interaction with the staff and the students goes beyond, I'm here to teach you some trigonometry now. So I think it's The best one I see was a school where this is what we created at Hollywood College for Eton. As the students were walking around, the staff were walking around, everybody would just be high-fiving each other. There'd be lots of laughter, lots of smiling, lots of eye contact. It was a very, very exciting environment to be. Definitely also a bit more sort of under the surface. That's very surface level stuff. Underneath the surface, you'll find that there would be fantastic communication between the student body and the sort of staff body. there would be a lot of really positive ideas coming up. It would be a school of change. The students would be saying, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? How about this? How about that? The staff would be saying, oh, can we try this? Can we try that? And it's that sort of freedom, that safety to express yourself. And I think it's a lack of cynicism, I would say, is also in there. But there's a definite buzz. You know when you're in a school that's getting it right, there is that buzz in the interaction between the staff, the students, and the students themselves. That's good. That's your indicator. Walking around, I'm a school inspector as well as sort of doing everything else, and that's one of the first things I look for. You arrive at the front gate, you sort of go in. The first thing you look for is how are people treating each other, and it's that interaction between people is the first indicator. Definitely. How does that sound? Does that
Yeah, I mean, that's the school that you want to be at, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's similar definitely to how I picture, if a school is flourishing, like you say, it's that surface level stuff, but when you get underneath the surface, there's, that respect and that communication that cuts through. Yeah. Hey, John, I'm interested, is there any podcasts that you're listening to or books that you're reading that you would, I don't know how you find time. I mean, you've got time maybe on your commute to read.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a good few hours a day that I can devote to these things. There is a fantastic book that I've just recently finished that I recommend. I would recommend it to everybody, but certainly for those listeners who are sort of teaching maths. And it's called Care in Mathematics Education. It's by Anne Watson, who was a lecturer at Oxford University, and I think she was a government advisor at one point as well for maths strategy. And she's written this book exploring how students learn maths better when they are in a safe, caring maths lesson, and what that safe, caring maths lesson could look like. So at a very sort of basic practitioner level, that book to me is absolute manna, because it's just ticking all the boxes. It's sort of things you, as a good sort of teacher or the good maths teacher, will realise that if you're creating that safe sort of space where the students can feel that they can sort of put their hand up and shout out ideas, and they're not going to get ridiculed or just sort of told off or just no, then they're obviously going to learn better. So that's a nice place to be, and I see parallels with that and what sort of Flourishing DS can do in sort of setting a culture of a school. So that's one book I've read, and that is very boring, maths related. So
it's actually but it actually sounds similar to this philosophy around psychological safety, which is quite the buzzword at the moment, which is allowing people to speak up and have voice without that threat of repercussion, professionally or personally.
Yes.
So this is similar
thing. Certainly something I'm trying to do as a principal here, is make sure my staff know that they can say whatever they want safely with no repercussions. They can challenge anything I do or anything I say. Feel free to challenge it. I welcome it. I encourage it. But during the commute, sometimes I'm going to say I do prefer to sort of switch off from work mode, and I do enjoy a good crime book. So Inspector Rebus is a big favourite of mine, and sort of Wallander, the Scandi Noir, that sort of stuff. So I churn through at least a book a week, sort of sitting on trains and buses.
Good man. You need a bit of escape. You need a bit of escapism.
Yeah. And in podcast, there's a good one called Cult of Pedagogy, which is really fascinating. If you've not come across that one, that's for all the sort of teachers and education nerds out there. Cult of Pedagogy. It's a real mix of short practical advice and sort of longer, more in-depth sort of discussions and sort of thought processes, which is great.
Well, that's one that no one's named yet, and I mean most of our listeners and guests are in education, so that's surprising.
There you go. That's an interesting one. I do like that.
It's exciting to have some novel suggestions. We've had a lot of ideas repeated, John. So you're an outlier. You're reading and listening to different things.
Excellent. And also, if I'm downtiming it, my big passion in life is rugby. So I listen to the Good, the Bad, and the Rugby podcast religiously. My own team, Bath Rugby Club. I listen to the Bath Rugby Plug podcast whenever that one comes out. So if anybody's interested in UK rugby and in the West Country, Bath is the place to go.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners are interested in rugby. So thanks. And now we'll be hearing from them all saying, well, what about my team? I don't want to listen to that team.
Yes. Well, what's the caveat? Other podcasts are available.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well played. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode of the Flourishing at School podcast. John, thank you for sharing so generously. You've had some fabulous advice, and I loved listening to your stories. If you are listening to this episode, don't forget you can watch us on the Flourish DX YouTube channel. And we'll be sharing some little snippets and highlights on our LinkedIn page, where I invite you to connect with Jason and I. John, are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Awesome. So you'll find John there as well. That's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time. Until then, keep flourishing at school and in life.
You've been listening to the Flourishing at School podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on whole school mental health, follow Flourish DX School on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Flourishing at School podcast at www.flourishingatschool.com.